us talking about the gospel isn't a marketing tool. It's not something that I think is earning me points in heaven. It's not something that it's not for my gain. I'm not doing this because I get something out of it. It's a great thing has been given to me, and I want to share that with others. It's just like when you go to a restaurant and you eat a really good meal, you want to tell everybody about it, and everyone does that.
Welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of Trevor Talks. I'm your host, Trevor Tyson, and I'm so thrilled to have you all here today for an episode that I didn't know if we were going to get to do again or not. So this is the second guest that we've had on for a second run. And today we've got the visionary, songwriter, lead vocalist, and guitar mastermind behind the band Wolves at the Gate, Steve Cobucci. Steve, dude, we're here. We made it.
Yeah.
It's been about maybe a year and a half since our last interview, and we got to talk about Eclipse and kind of how Wolves at the Gate got started. And now you have this, I don't want to get too excited. I'm not going to fangirl over it, but you have the best record of your career about to come out, Eulogies, and I'm blown away. Astoundish, I think, would be the right word for it. But again, I don't want to fangirl too hard, but I'm fully confident that this is going to be a number one record, so I'm pumped about it.
Thanks. Yeah. We're really excited about it too. We feel pretty proud of what we put together, and we're just excited to be here on our fifth full length, and we're still just as excited to make and put out music as we were our first. So
well, it's wild to think about, like, you're putting out your fifth full-length album, and obviously you have a very strong faith emphasis on your work. It has to be weird saying that right now. Like, a lot of people start making music and it kind of just falls away, but you guys stayed consistent. You stayed the course, and God's blessed you with a career to where you can now say, our fifth record is coming out. I believe it's purely going to impact people. Do you guys have anything? Well, obviously there's a lot of unique things on this record, but what's the unique messaging that you have behind this? Like the concept with Eulogies, when I look at the cover art, you have what appears to be a flame engulfing a flower, but then also a hand that looks like it's pretty burnt up. Like, it doesn't get more unique than that, but what's the concept behind that? And then the record as a whole?
What's cool, I think, about the album art is, we knew that most people would assume that the flower is being engulfed by the fire, rather than, because really I wanted people to ask the question, is the fire starting, or is the fire on its way out? And so is the fire what is revealing the flower, or is the fire devouring the flower? And so that kind of ties into the concept of Eulogies. I think the thing that's most unique about this record is it was fully self-reflective and not necessarily thinking about how can I write a song to speak to this or to that. It's rather, all the songs were really pretty much inspired by things that I had just personally struggled with, songs I want to hear, songs I want to sing, truths that I want to be reminded of. And so it was really unique in that way. And, a lot of artists, that's how they write their music. I've not always written in that way. And so it was unique for me. And so I guess it'll be unique for our listeners, is to kind of hear things through a little bit more of a personal lens, but applying all of those same, the elements of our faith that are so prevalent in our music. Just trying to find a different way and angle. And I think what I'm excited for is just to see, hopefully, the ways in which I've learned a lot through my journey, through failures and mistakes and brokenness and trials and difficulties. These songs are all the truths that rose to the surface, amidst those difficulties. And a lot of it is just finding things in myself that I don't like. and not like insecure things, like things that are wrong objectively. Not like I don't like the way my hair looks, or I'm not superficial things. These are soul things. These are heart
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And some of them were like beliefs that I held, things that I thought were truth, things that I thought were sound in doctrine, but actually weren't, and they needed to die. And so that's where the title Eulogies comes from, because it's kind of this idea of things that needed to die, and eulogies can be sad, or they can be positive. And so it's sad, at any funeral that somebody has to die, but for the believer, there's great hope that you no longer have to suffer in this broken world, and you're made new. And so there's a lot of different layers and ways that album concept comes to bear through all the songs.
And that is unique, because I mean, I even said like it's engulfing the flower, the flame is engulfing the flower, but it's actually the complete opposite. It's fascinating to see, like, obviously there's a lot of Christian bands that fade out of their faith eventually, which is disheartening. But the one thing that I really admire about Wolves at the Gate is you guys didn't even know about Christcore when you got started. It wasn't like an angle that you're like, yeah, we're going to go join For Today and Sleeping Giant and all these other bands. And you just kind of came out and you were honest with yourself. You were honest about your faith, and you started putting out music that the only aim for it was to inspire people and to share with them about your faith. Obviously, in the music industry, that can be a double-edged sword. One way, like, you're getting booked for the church events, there can be a lot more money in that for some people, but I've never gotten that vibe from you guys. I've never gotten that one time. And the consistency of the records, from my favorite this far has been Eclipse. And then now, like, March 11th, Eulogies is coming out, and it's going to impact so many more people. But one thing I do want to touch on is the song Lights and Fire, because when I heard it for the first time, I was like, this can't be Wolves. But then obviously it was. I mean, your voice is very distinct. Like, people can obviously understand it's you, but it's a unique song for you guys in particular. It's catchy. I wouldn't call it radio friendly, because that would be kind of like a pop song, right? But it's phenomenal and it's unique. But I want to hear, like, what's the story behind Lights and Fire, and how did you challenge yourself musically to piece that thing together the way you did?
So Lights and Fire was a song that just, the way that it got started was Joey, our guitar player, and I were always like sharing like different like recording stuff and gizmos and gadgets, anything to help the creative process. We're always sharing that with each other, whether it's a sample pack or whatever, drum libraries, guitar tones. But there was this really simple like app that Joe found called Spire, that you could do multi-track recording on your phone. And that to me was super cool. I'd been using the voice memo app, on my phone for as long as I had an iPod Touch, even back to before I had an iPhone. I was recording song ideas on that. And so I was like, oh, cool, let me play around with this. And so I just decided, I was like, all right, let me just play a chord progression. And so I just played a chord progression, first thing that came to my mind. And then I looped it and just started fiddling on the guitar. And that's where I came up with kind of the main melody of the song. And as soon as I did that, I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Because new gear tends to be inspiring, even though it's like probably like, I guess the least technical, or what would be it. It's not as exciting as a guitar, but that's I don't know, it worked for that moment. And so that's what kind of created the heart of the song. But Lights and Fire as like musical piece was slower, probably by 20 BPMs, which is pretty drastic in music. And I just kept trying to figure out a way to, I'm like, no, this doesn't work. I'm like, will this even be a Wolves song? And then once I figured out the right tempo, and really the drums were super important, kind of figuring out how we're going to drive this, because the vocals are very, kind of like bigger and, anthemic sounding, but I wanted to have the energy that our band communicates, because that's what I love about music, and so I just wanted something that felt like it was driving and moving, and then eventually the song came together that way, and then I brought it to the guys, and we all kind of took it apart and put it back together again and made it what it is. So
Come on. And with the messaging behind the song, and obviously with Peace That Starts the War, Stop the Bleeding, even Silent Anthem, there's always a positive message coming out of your music. No matter how angry the song might sound like, there's always a silver lining. But for many people, they struggle with anxiety and depression, suicidal ideation, and all these internal battles on a daily basis. Is that something that you keep in mind as you go into the writing process, or are these songs like personal for you? Like, I've gone through this. Are you thinking of fans? Are you thinking of yourself? Or when you go into the writing process for some of these more vulnerable songs, what's on your mind?
Yeah, kind of as what I was saying before is I generally in the past have thought more so about the listener.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, like most records, it was probably like 70% thinking about the listener, 30% myself, like in the realm of songs, like amounts of songs. But yeah, this record felt like pretty close to 100% myself. And I think one of the I'm not sure if I talked to you about this on the last podcast or not, but something that's really important for me is that I'm not looking to be a leader for anyone. I don't want people to look at me and have any sort of false idea of who I am. I want people to see the equality that we all share, is that there's no such thing as a super Christian. Don't exist. They're just great sinners and a great savior. And so I want our songs to resemble that reality. And I just found this as another, when I did think about the fans, I thought about it in that way, as I've drawn great comfort from something the Apostle Paul said, which is, he said it a few different ways. One way he said is, basically, God used me as an example to show how merciful he is, right? Which everybody thinks he was this. I mean, he was obviously incredibly and powerfully used by God, but he knew who he was. There's a quote from Paul where he says, "It's a trustworthy statement, worthy of full acceptance, that Christ came to save sinners, of whom I am the foremost. I'm the worst. I'm the chief of sinners." And it's been such a comforting scripture for me, because I want to share that title with Paul, because that's how I feel it in that way. And so, yeah, I want our music to communicate the reality of who I am, not this idea of I'm this like world shaker, planet mover, I'm just the man, who's received this, divine grace. And so I want people to look at that rather than myself.
It's unique to find, especially a frontman in a band, not dissing frontman or anything, but just historically, when someone is in a band, they're like, "Hey, look at me, I want the attention. Like, this is what I'm here for." You don't show that at all. Is that something that you've had to combat yourself, like internally, or are you just one of those people that's like, I don't want the attention, I don't want anything, I just want to reflect my feelings and let people know that there's a God that loves them?
Obviously, like, yeah, my flesh tells me go get that, right? I think everybody's does and would, even the most meek and humble men of the earth, and women would have struggled with the same thing. But I just saw how destructive it is for people, especially in music. How there's an old saying that says, "Don't meet your heroes," right? Or
Say it on a daily
there's a
basis.
reason for that, because that person may not be mean or a jerk, but we kind of create these expectations of what people are like and make them out to be more than they are. And we're not really designed to put our hope in people in that way, because yeah, it'll be a letdown regardless. And so, yeah, I think that's just something that I've carried with me. And I've been the recipient of that, seeing people that I've looked up to, and appreciated their impact in my life. And that's the message they communicated to me, that's how they carried themselves. And I just saw that as really, beneficial and, admirable too. So.
Come on. Is there any song on the album that you're particularly excited to play live?
Yeah. The song Weight of Glory is just a lot of fun. Yeah, it's been a while since we've written a song in that vein, but I think even this is just kind of like a, steroid infused, 2.0 version of anything we've done like that. So it's a lot of fun.
Nice. And there's one song in particular that I really like you to dissect for us, and it's Silent Anthem, because to me personally, it brought a lot of peace, but it also expressed a lot of emotion in it. So when it comes to that song in particular, can you dissect the writing process, the messaging behind it, and what you hope it translates to people?
Yeah, once I'd had the music for that song, even before writing Eclipse. And I tried to make it happen on Eclipse, and it didn't come together. And so I just went back to the drawing board for this album, and really love how it turned out this time around. It was just a much better version of the original idea. And I had written essentially what most people will probably come to understand as 2/3 of the song, because the song kind of takes a shift, 2/3 into it. And I'd written that section, and I started trying to write lyrics and realized what I wanted the song to be about. And that's when it kind of changed the whole concept. And that's where we ended up coming up with the song ending idea. Because basically it revolves around this concept of, being a Christian band in, the music scene, has definitely provided some challenges for us. We've had people in the industry tell us, certain things to do to be more successful, or certain things not to do. And, I'm sure a lot of these people have had good intentions. There's also been those who don't have good intentions. They just want us to stop doing what we're doing. It's something that's like, yeah, it's bothered me for sure. It's been a hard thing to kind of process and kind of figure out how to deal with mentally, not being, upset, or, not letting it affect me, or affect how I relate with people. And so really this song was kind of birthed from a lot of those difficulties, and it was kind of a way for me to explain who we are as a band and why we do what we do. That this isn't us talking about the gospel isn't a marketing tool. It's not something that I think is earning me points in heaven. It's not something that it's not for my gain. I'm not doing this because I get something out of it. It's a great thing has been given to me, and I want to share that with others. It's just like when you go to a restaurant and you eat a really good meal, you want to tell everybody about it, and everyone does that. That's all I'm wanting to do with our music, and when we preach the gospel at our shows is just that. I'm not trying to win people to my religion so that I can make money or get like I don't benefit. It's for the benefit of others, really. And maybe that sounds really, really humble, but I'm really selfless. But it's when you understand what the grace is, it's not really being selfless. It's like I'm trying I want you to share in this beautiful thing that's free. Because I didn't earn it. I didn't figure it out on my own. It's not by wisdom, by knowledge, or by strength or might. It's a free gift. And so, as much as I think people have, tried to get us to be, I guess, silent regarding this matter, talking about Jesus or the gospel. Okay, we'll go away one day. One day we'll stop making music, and one day we'll be irrelevant. But the message of the gospel won't ever be. It has been around. It's been a promise since the dawn of man. It became a reality 2,000 years ago, and Christians have been telling this gospel message for thousands of years, dying for it, dying to preserve the written word. And so it's not just because we go away doesn't mean it's going to go away. And in the book of Revelation is what really inspires the song. Is the anthem of heaven is exactly what is said in Revelation 5 and Revelation 7, which is worthy is the Lamb who is slain. The true Savior will be made known. And so that's really what kind of inspired the song, is that it's not really about us and what we want to do. It's something so much bigger and outside of us. But we're just this like tiny little speck in this massive history of redemptive history of what's going on. And so that's why in the bridge of the song, when people hear it, it's going to sound like we're being silenced, because we will. One day we'll die, and our music will be irrelevant or whatever, but the trueness of the song won't ever be.
Yeah.
So
to kind of close this up, as you said, like eventually you're going to stop making music and you're going to be silenced. But for that next generation of not even just Christian metalcore acts, but people that are creatives that have a message of hope, whether it's Christian, other religion, whatever, what would your message be to them if they're in a season of like, I'm never going to be able to make it in music, blah, blah, blah? Is there a story that you can share that kind of maps out a time that you've wanted to give up, that you've thought that maybe this message is too much for you to carry, but how would you relay that to the next generation?
If you don't want to do it when no one's paying attention, then you don't want to do it. It's that simple. We always, as a band, said that we, what people say, oh, if only one person was at the show, right? There's always like that classic,
you get on a stage in front of one person and tell me it doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
We, you say all those things. And I remember the first tour we ever did, we played a whole show to the bartender. So It wasn't even a paid customer. And, like we were setting up and that's all it was in there was the bartender. And, I think people in bands often forget that like there's people at the show, but there's people that work the venue. And so I was just like, all right, this is a real shot to the pride, but let's do what we do, because somebody is there. They turned on the speakers. They're expecting us to play. And eventually I think, one or two people walked in, 3 songs in, but like if you're only passionate because there's a big audience, then you're not actually passionate about the message. You're probably more passionate about who's paying attention. And so, I would say is just really consider what is it that you really want? What is your goal? And if your goal is to impact people, obviously you're going to need people to do that, but the numbers are irrelevant. You're not going to serve anyone if you're expecting them to serve you by praising you and being present. I believe I've most poignantly learned that lesson from reading the Gospels and seeing who Jesus is he said it I didn't come to be served, but to serve. That's why he came, you know? And so, yeah, that's my answer.
Dude, that's so good. And Wolves at the Gates' new album, Eulogies, will be out everywhere on March 11th. Steve, thank you so much for being here, dude. It's always a pleasure to have you. You're just so lax, and it's easy to get questions out with you. And you always have great answers. I know you're always like, sorry, that was long. No, like you have great answers and great insight, and people love to hear it. So you never, ever have to apologize for that. Like, you're doing it. I appreciate you. I love the new record. I do think it's your best record yet, and the best is yet to come for you guys. So thanks again for being here.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
And for everybody listening and watching, whether you're on YouTube or any of the streaming networks, just know that you're loved, and there's always someone that is there to tell you that. And our friends over at Heart Support have some amazing resources for you. You can also check out death2life.com, death, the number 2 life. And there are so many resources for you if you're struggling with your mental health, depression, anxiety, or maybe you're feeling suicidal. There's always hope. You are loved, and God loves you so much. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.